Hello linguists! Welcome to Phonetics 1, our first lecture on the study of language sounds. Now there's a reason that I began this course with Our Goofy English. It was not just to have some fun at the expense of our language, though I hope that was fun. It was to point out that English letters cannot reliably used as symbols for language sounds. You might remember these examples of how orthography does not match up with pronunciation. Not exactly a scientific system. Well, this goofiness has been observed for a long time, centuries in fact, and there have been various plans for ironing out all of the wrinkles. The term in the 18th century was to fix or ascertain, to make certain, to make clear, to make logical the spelling practices in English. You might even have gotten this in your email at some point. I've gotten it, I think, about 20 times from well-meaning friends who know that I love language and thought that I would be amused by this. And I am amused by this. This is Mark Twain's, well, it's supposedly from Mark Twain. It's probably a specious or spurious attribution. Someone else probably wrote it, but it's very Twain-like. This is his someone's satirical plan for improving English spelling. If you've not read it, go ahead and pause the lecture and have a read through. The thing is, it's not really a plan for improving English spelling. It's a satire of English spelling and how irregular it is, and just what it would take to make it regular and logical. It really points out the fact that it's not a possible task. It can't be done. People would never go along with it. Just have a look at that final paragraph beginning, finally then, after some 20 years, without reading the rest of it, and you'll see what I mean. There was, however, one very serious attempt to fix the English spelling and writing system by George Bernard Shaw. You may remember that name from English literature class. He's a Nobel Prize and Pulitzer Prize, I think, winning playwright. He wrote Pygmalion. That is the play that My Fair Lady is based on, and I love that musical because it stars a linguist. That's Henry Higgins there on the left. And he's teaching Eliza Doolittle, a Cockney woman from a low working class in London, how to become a lady. And his theory, his wager, is that just by changing the way she speaks, he'll be able to change the way she is perceived as an upper class lady. So what he tried to do, Henry Higgins, for Eliza Doolittle, George Bernard Shaw actually tried to do for the English language. He decided to fund a competition to come up with a phonetic alphabet. Phonetic meaning non-goofy. It was won by a guy named Ronald Kingsley, and unfortunately, Shaw died before the prize could be awarded, but Shaw's will, provided for the publication of one of his own plays, Androcles and the Lion, in a bi-alphabetic edition. That means facing page, not two different languages, but standard English spelling, and this new writing system, which won the prize, developed by Mr. Kingsley. You can see a bit of it on the front of the 1962 edition of the Penguin's book. So we call this the Shavian alphabet. That's a funny word, an alphabet to shave to. Shavian is the adjectival form of Shaw. It looks like, I don't know, Elvish, hieroglyphics, something scratched out by chickens. It's actually quite rational. If you look, just start at the top, the P and the B, P, B, they're very similar. We'll see how similar later in this lecture. They're actually inverses. One's tall, one's low, and then T and D. They're also very closely related sounds. Again, they're inverses of each other. And there are other useful things. The vowels in the third row are all rather similar, and there's some helpful abbreviations down there on the bottom row. Well, this obviously took the English-speaking world by storm because we all know we've never seen this before. It did not catch on. In fact, you probably didn't know the effort even happened. So let's give Shaw his due and take just a minute. I've written you a secret message. So on the top is your decoder system, and on the bottom I've written out a 4-word message. Pause the presentation right now, take a minute, and let me get you started. The first letter here is this. It makes the SH sound in sure. Later we'll learn to refer to it as the long S. This symbol right here, we're going to look for that in the vowels, and we will find it right here. That's the aw sound. So sh, aw, shaw. The first word is shaw. as in our author. Pause and see if you can figure out the message. Oh, by the way, I'll give you one clue. 2016 presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders. That's all I'm saying. Well, eventually a scientific solution did come along. And it was beer. No, not beer. But it was IPA. And for those of you who are aficionados, you know IPA refers to India Pale Ale in the world of brewing. That's what the British would make. It was very hoppy, very sort of biting, and that preserved it for the long voyage out to India, which was a British colony at the time. So there's your beer history for the lecture. No, IPA stands for linguists for the International Phonetic Alphabet, developed in 1886, begun then when a bunch of language teachers from England and France got together and said, well, basically everything we've been saying in this lecture so far, that our language symbols cannot be used scientifically to refer to sounds. So they met in Paris, and their principle, we need a one-to-one correspondence. Every sound has one symbol, and every symbol makes one sound. Also, they wanted a system that was universal. We could represent all human language sounds, everything our vocal apparatus is capable of making, with some interesting inclusions. There are click languages that have left clicks, right clicks, center clicks, glottal, uvular clicks, and there are symbols for all of those. I'm very impressed that they even eventually added symbols for people who have cleft palates. Truly, all human language sounds. There's a set of basic symbols, and then because they're nuances in language, they're a system of diacritics. That would be little marks above or below, sometimes beside the symbol, to add a little nuance telling you it's pronounced a little bit like this. Very important. A lot of these symbols are in our alphabet, but we're going to put brackets around them to say, hello, I'm not an English letter, I'm an IPA symbol. I don't have the value you learned in elementary school. I have the value you learned in hell. So who uses IPA? Well, the OED does. Phonologists, those who study language or who are language therapists. Musicians, in singing foreign languages. British dictionaries also use IPA. However, American dictionaries do not. I assume they think we Americans are not up to the task of learning the system. So what they do is each dictionary makes up its own system, which has led to just a terrible confusion. I look at a Webster's dictionary and they say it's pronounced like these values. I have no idea what they're talking about because it's a made-up system. It's not IPA. Here it is. Isn't she beautiful? That's the entire thing. And no, we're not learning all of it. We're not even learning all of the consonants, just basic symbols for American English consonants. Now, before we begin, we need to take a little tour of our heads. So this is your nasal cavity, and this is your mouth. So let's start here. Go left to right. And I want you to be very sort of physically engaged. Get to know the inside of your mouth, because to know oneself is one of the hardest tasks, and that includes linguistics. To know your mouth is a very hard task. So these are the articulators, the parts of you that you use to make language sounds. The lips, bottom and top, labia in Latin, and that's the root they'll show up as. Back from those are our vampiric-looking teeth. Dent, like dentist, is their root. Now, if you'll take your tongue, and this is your tongue, I know that's not what it feels like, but the blade is like the tip of your tongue, and then we talk about the body of your tongue, the sort of mid to back part. If you'll take the tip of your tongue and kind of lick your lips, that's up here, and then run the tip of your tongue from your teeth just back. Do you feel a little bitty mountain range right there? That's your alveolar ridge. Alveolar ridge. And that's a very important place because a lot of important sounds like t and duh are made with the tongue and the alveolar ridge right here. So continue curling your tongue back from the teeth past the alveolar ridge, and you'll notice there's a hard top of your mouth. That's your palate, or hard palate. It's first hard, and then it goes soft. And where it goes soft, if you can curl your tongue back that far on the roof of your mouth, it's called the velum. And sounds made there are called velar. And some sounds are made sort of in between this area. Looking down, you have your pharynx and your epiglottis. If you, let's see, hold your breath by closing off the air in the back of your mouth, you do that at your glottis or epiglottis right here. And then also notice your larynx. You call that your voice box. And your vocal cords are right here as part of the larynx. They're really more like folds than cords, so I'm going to call them vocal folds. And we'll find out what they do in a bit. These are the IPA consonants, again, in all languages. And of course, we have to go beyond the English letter symbols to be able to represent all those sounds. English, fortunately, does not have nearly all of these, nor does any language. We use a subset to distinguish meaning. All right, at this point, you need to pause in the lecture and do one of two things. You either need to go find the chart in a PDF or Word document which is attached to this assignment called Consonant Articulation Chart and print that out. Actually print it out. You can't just have it on computer. Or you need to pause and take a minute and copy down exactly what you see on the screen onto your notes, onto a piece of paper. Long ways, maybe. Big format. Leave lots of space for symbols and example sounds, example words, for notes, and sometimes for explanations and labels. So I'll give you a second to do that. Press pause, and when you click play again, be ready to start filling in symbols, and let's learn IPA consonants. Okay, I assume everyone has a chart that's blank. You actually need to do something else, or you have a decision to make. You need to find someplace quiet you can go, where you will feel free to make funny sounds, popping and crackling and whooshing and ticking sounds, where you will not be worried that people will think you're crazy. Or you need to decide if they already think you are crazy, or if you don't mind them coming to that decision and staying where you are, right in public. So, consonants. We'll do vowels next time, but in contrast to vowels, vowels are very open sounds. They are made by making different chambers through which the air passes. Consonants are made by closing down the chamber of your mouth, sometimes closing it completely, or at least obstructing the air as it passes through your mouth. Vowels open, consonant closed or constricted. So let's get to know our chart. Across the top we have column headings. These are places of articulation. Every sound you'll see in the cells is located by a place of articulation across the top and a manner of articulation, the rows down the left side. So let's start with place. Place of articulation, the labels across the top pretty much map that diagram of your mouth and face that we looked at before. So bilabial, 2 lips. Labiodental, that's lip and tooth. Interdental means in between the teeth. You should be writing these in, by the way. Alveolar, mountain range, right? Alveopalatal. Now, I know we didn't talk about that as a specific place. Think of that as back of the alveolar ridge through the hard palate. Then we have the velar sounds, which are made on the velum. That would be the back of your tongue going up to that soft part. And finally, we have one glottal sound. That's back in your throat. In addition to place of articulation along the top and manner of articulation along the side, there's one more distinguishing characteristic. And I'm not going to name it yet, but it's the reason why there are 2 different brackets in many of these cells, not all of them. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's start with our stops. First of all, I'd like you to, this is time to play along now, okay? Put your 2 lips together, build up some pressure behind them, and without doing anything else, let the pressure go. Just release it. P, p. The P sound, right? So that is a bilabial stop, because you stopped the air, you dammed it up, and you released it. Another word for stop you might want to write in, you'll hear it, is plosive. It's the word explosive without the X. Plosive meaning it explodes out of your mouth. So in your first bracket, upper bracket, write a P. Now I want you to just make the B sound. B, B, B. Make a P and then a B. P, buh, buh. What's the difference? See if you can find it. Pause when you need to. Here's an easy way to find it. It's not the place in your mouth, you're still bilabial, and it's still the same manner, it's still a stop. Here's how to tell the difference. Put your hand physically over your neck and press lightly. Now go p, buh, p, buh. Do you feel the vibration on the B? That vibration is called voicing. It's actually what you do when you hum. It's the thing you don't do when you whisper. You're vibrating your vocal cords. So if we stuck a camera down your throat, the little vocal folds would be vibrating on the B, but not the P. Otherwise, they would be identical. So, write a B. And we've now learned our third element of sound articulation, voicing. We'll adopt the convention that sounds on the top are not voiced or voiceless, unvoiced. Sounds on the bottom are voiced. You might write that in on your chart as well. Still in the stop row, there's nothing in these cells, but we're going to move our tongue to our alveolar ridge. So go ahead and, like we did before, put your tongue on your alveolar ridge and dam the sound there with pressure, and then just let it go. T, t. You hear it? And you know what to write in there, I bet. That's a T. Now, by analogy, just like we went from P to B, go from T, and see if you can vibrate your vocal cords. Put your hand over your voice box again. T, 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 d, 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 d. Not changing manner or place, but vibrating the vocal folds, you get a D. We're now going to go further back. Don't try and get the tip of your tongue back to your velum. Instead, raise the back, the blade, or the body of your tongue in the back of your mouth and dam the sound up there and let it go. K, k. Do you feel the K? Now voice it. K, 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 k. A K voices into a G. So learn your stops. Ptk, PTK, unvoiced, and badaga, voiced. Let's move down to our second row. Fricatives. What does fricative sound like? As a manner of articulation, it sounds like friction. If the stops completely dam up the air and then let it go, fricatives close down the mouth and the air sort of swishes past, making a frictioning sort of sound. Labiodental. All right, you're going to use your one lip and one tooth. And in English, that's your top teeth on your bottom lips. So go ahead and construct that with your face. And then instead of damming the sound completely, let it friction out. And you get the F sound. Now voice it. The F voices into a V. Now, I'm just going to take a little bit of a digression here because I can't stop myself. Labiodental is not specific. It doesn't point out which labia and which dents you're using. We just automatically go to top teeth on bottom lip. But what if you inverted that and did your bottom teeth on your top lips? Go ahead and build that. Now, I'll go ahead and say I don't know of any language in the entire world where they have labiodental fricatives, which are like this, but it's possible to do your F's with your lower teeth of your upper lip, and it's possible to do your V's like that too. And I would just invite you, if you need a lark, some fun, to go through one day trying to say all your labiodental fricatives, voiced and unvoiced, upside down. In other words, I think it would be very fun if you tried to do that. Now, back to our chart. Interdental. Inter means between. Now you're going to take your tongue and put it between your teeth and bite down. No, not very hard. Please don't hurt yourself. No linguistics injuries, please. But place your tongue between your teeth and let the air friction through on either side around it. You get a th sound. So let's think about the sound we just made. Before I give you symbols, we need to notice that there are two different brackets here. Make the sound in thing. Now make the sound in there. Th. This is maybe the messiest English ever gets. At this point, we have two TH sounds. Did you even realize that? and they're two different sounds. They're as different as p and b, and as different as f and v, but we think of them as the same. This is also a complicated area because we can't write th in that bracket right there. We're not allowed to use a two-piece symbol, mostly. So we need to use another one. We're going to go with Greek. That's a theta. And we need another symbol. That one, it's called an eth, E-T-H. You want to write that in. For the sound in there, and those, and they. The eth, by the way, is a rune. That means it comes from ancient Germanic languages. It was actually used in Old English, one of the ancient Germanic languages. Moving backwards in the fricative row, put your tongue right where you put it to make the alveolar T and D, t, d, but instead of touching the alveolar ridge, let your tongue hover just below the alveolar ridge. And with it just lower than T and D position, let the air friction by. So t, d, s. You see what you get? An S. An S is sort of like an incomplete T, where you haven't closed the sound off completely. Now voice the S, S, and you get a Z. To find our next set of sounds, we want to start with the alveolar fricatives, the S and the Z. So start by making an S, and I want you, as you make the sound, to pull your tongue back from the alveolar ridge onto the hard palate. What do you get? You get the SH sound. It's just an S made a little bit further back. You might think of it as a totally different sound, but it's just a further back S. Just a fricative, but more palatal than alveolar. Again, we have a digraph, you would call it, a two-symbol system in English. SH, we can't do that here. We need another letter, and this, believe it or not, is an English letter, just not anymore. That's called a long S. And the long S was used in English as a way of writing S up through the 18th century. It's even in our Constitution. Now take that SH sound and voice it. Sh, zh. If the top is SH, you might think of this as like ZH. This is an interesting sound because it did not exist originally in English, and nearly every word that has zh in it is borrowed from, guess what language? French. It's the first sound in je, I, in Jacques, and it's the sound we use in words borrowed from French like garage, also in pleasure. That j sound tells you it's probably from French. So we need a symbol for it, and I'm going to give you this. It's called esh. All right, fricatives, there are a lot of them. There's one more. Glottal is all the way back down in your throat. So what if you almost constrict your throat and let the air friction through? It's a breathy sound. It's an H sound. Believe it or not, much of the hard work is already done. I also want to take a moment for a little pep talk. Everything that we're covering in this lecture and the next one, you already know. The thing is, you don't know that you know. You're able to do it, but you're not conscious of that ability, and you're not aware of how you perform that which you do so naturally. So think of today as just learning to be aware of that which you already knew. Affricates. Sounds like Africa, has nothing to do with Africa. This is a little bit of a combination category. There are only two of them, and you want to think of an affricate, in fact you can write that right here, as a stop plus a fricative. The sound begins with a stop and continues with a fricative. And yes, I know what you're thinking. One symbol, one sound. And some linguists say, yes, this is a kind of violation of that rule, but it's also sort of a blend, you would say, of something that begins as a stop and then continues as a fricative, as its own language sound. Both of our affricates are alveopalatal, so in the same place you say sh and zh, and it involves those two sounds, but it puts a beginning on them. And the sound that it puts on the beginning of them are these two sounds right here. A T with a long S and a D with an edge. T, sh, That would be the TCH or TSCH in German sound. It's the sound in church. You might write church there. It's the first and the last sound in church, in fact. Now let's voice that. Ch. Starts with D and continues with J, J, J. This would be the sound in judge. Actually, the sound at the beginning and the end of judge. Sort of the J sound or the DGE sound. J. Our fourth manner of articulation are nasal sounds. With nasal sounds, the sound does not come out of your mouth. The sound comes out of your nose. And the nasals are actually a kind of stop where you do something to prevent the sound from coming out of your mouth using your tongue by placing it in different locations so that it goes up and out your nasal cavity, acquiring a whole other sort of sonority to it. There's a bilabial nasal. So just like we started off making our P, dam the sound with your lips, build up some pressure, and instead of blowing the pressure out to make a P, just let the air go up and out your nose. By the way, everything from here on down is voiced. In fact, everything from this line down is voiced. Have you found the sound yet? It's mm. Again, let's dam the sound, this time with our tongue in the T or S position, and have your tongue fill your mouth, touching the alveolar ridge. Hum, and let the sound go out your nose. Mm. That's an N. There's one more nasal, further back in the mouth, in the KG location, and this one is the sound that you make every time you have a word which ends in ing. Let's think about ing. Coming, going, leaving, eating. We spell it ing, but there's no I in it, there's no n in it, and there's definitely no g in it. It's not coming. No, it's coming. And is a sound of its own. You might not think of it as its own sound or even realize that it's a sound in itself because words can't begin with it in English, though they can in Vietnamese. The name, if you've seen Nguyen, I don't have good Vietnamese pronunciation, but it's something like Nguyen, where the first sound is ng. Well, we need a symbol for this, and it's my favorite. It's so cute. So make an N, a lowercase n, but keep going. So that the N, I think of it as an elephant's trunk, sort of curving under, like it's having a drink and about to spray itself. That's ang. E-N-G. Ang is the name of the symbol. There's one more category. We call them approximants. Approximants, that's really a grab bag. They're a bunch of sort of misfits and oddities that we throw together here at the bottom. Fortunately, there are only 4. And I'd like you to start in the middle with the alveolar approximants. These two together are called the liquids. Just these two, so you could write that right here, the liquids. And the first, here, is L. L is called the lateral liquid, and you might write that as a note here. Lateral is Latin for sides, on the sides. So what's on the sides? Well, let's make the sound. Put your tongue in alveolar position, full T position, and with your voice box humming, let the sound go around your tongue, and you get oh. So it's a sound made in the alveolar position with the air going laterally around the tongue. There's another sound which we make pretty much in exactly the same place, and that is the retroflex liquid. So if you take your tongue, let's go from this one to this one, and make a oh. I want you to detach your tongue from the alveolar ridge and curl it backwards like you're trying to point back at your velum. You go from and you get an R sound. Let's pop the symbol in, but notice it's upside down. Why would it be upside down? That is the IPA symbol for and there's another IPA symbol, which is a right side up R. And the reason that this one for English is upside down is because that is the less common way of making an R sound. If you know a foreign language, R is probably trilled, R. That is the more common retroflex alveolar approximant in the world, and so it gets to be right side up, and the British and American English sound gets to be upside down, because IPA is not Anglo-centric. Our last two sounds, one here and one here, together form a subcategory of approximants. Those two are glides. So you have sort of a front glide and a back glide. These are actually sort of difficult to place on the chart. Different linguists do it differently because they move. They start in one place and, like the name suggests, they glide somewhere else. Let's start in the front. Bilabial. And this is the W sound. W, w, w. Do you feel how you start it with your lips together, but then you pull your lips back and the sound sort of moves toward the back of your mouth. W. The other sound that glides is made more toward the back of the mouth, alveopalatal, and that is the y sound. And here you need to think about J in German, where it makes the sound ya, like ja, J-A. It's not ja. Remember, this is ja. This is ya. You put the body of your tongue, ya, up here on the alveopalatal ridge, and then it sort of moves down and maybe a little bit back. Ya. So within approximants, to review, we have the alveolar liquids, l and and the two glides, w and a ya. And with that, you've completed consonants. Now I want to make one more observation. Notice how the sounds change as you go from the top to the bottom. We start with the air completely stopped. P, t, k. And down here, once we get to the nasals and the approximants, they're very open. Yeah. And we started off by saying that that's a feature of vowels. Vowels are open shapings of the mouth. Consonants are closing. So you might make a little arrow going down and note that as you get further down this chart in manner of articulation, the sounds become more vowel-like, more sonorous, and vowel-like you can use the word vocalic. You can even say that by the time we're at approximants, we have semivowel, semiconsonants, that we're right on the borderline between consonants and vowels. Now before I let you go, I do really want to emphasize that the way to learn this material is not to bang your forehead against this chart until you've learned, okay, alveolar fricative, voiced alveolar fricative is a Z, and memorize that like you're memorizing some language you don't know. Because right now it does sound like a foreign language. I want you to find it. So if I give you voiced alveolar fricative, I want you to build it using your face. So, alveolar fricative. Put your tongue in the alveolar position. Put the air friction by, and voice. Zzz, and you've got the symbol, Z. I want you to find these in your mouth rather than learning them by rote. That will be much easier. By the way, here are those foreign symbol names. Theta from Greek, eth from Germanic, esh, that's called, the long S I call it. Edge is from Persian, and eng is from, well, Benjamin Franklin. Here's some resources that you can use. There's a font package right there called Dulosil, and then you'll have to go to the Insert symbol menu when you've selected that font, and you can find all of these symbols and all the other ones, and all the diacritic marks to add to them too. Or, even easier, you can go to the online IPA keyboard. If you go there, you see all of these symbols, and you just click on one, and it appears in a little box that you can then copy and paste into Word. If you forget the sounds made by our different symbols, you can go to the, I think it's a Wikipedia page, right? And just click on a sound and hear it spoken. And you can find out what all those other weird symbols say. And this is maybe the most fun. This is like an animated version of that diagram of your vocal apparatus. And you can click on different sounds, like duh, and it will show you your tongue going up to the alveolar ridge, damming the air and moving down. It'll show the vocal folds vibrating. They're kind of cute. They go yeah, 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 and vibrate. And they'll show you what it looks like when you make the duh. And if I remember correctly, you can go there in English and in Spanish and see that even though Spanish and English both have like a D and a T and an L, we make them in slightly different positions. And that, students, is the key to accent.